Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today, we are talking about dragons, specifically dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire, but I'm sure that we can talk a little bit wider about other dragons in Middle-earth or wherever if you want as well. But there are two things I want to say first of all. The first thing is last week we had a charity fundraiser. I had on Aziz from History of Westeros, and we were raising money for Ukrainian refugees. And I was absolutely bowled over by everyone's generosity. So I wanted to say a huge thank you to people. We've raised, as of now, over $4,000 just from a little live stream, which I know will go a huge long way. You don't need me to remind you about the situation or how important it is, but this is money which is going to help people who really, really need some help right now. So thank you so much if you donated. If you haven't donated and do still want to, all you have to do is go back to last week's live stream. Then if you click on it, you will find a big donate button somewhere, and the option is still there. I've just left it open, and it will stay open for a long time. Anyway, so that's the first thing. Thank you. Massive thank you for that. The second thing is an update. We had an update yesterday from George R.R. Martin. He does this roughly once a year, give us a big update on what's going on, what his writing priorities are, how he's getting on with the Winds of Winter. Normally he does this a little bit earlier in the year, but he has done it now. It is a huge update. It's probably the biggest update he's done for quite some time, and it has some pretty big implications for what we're going to get from him and when. So I will go through what he said, a little bit of reading between the lines, because there is a lot. It's the short answer, but the headline is, yes, of course, I am still working on the Winds of Winter. He says this 2 or 3 times. He is working on it. He's making progress. He made a lot of progress, he says, in 2020. He's told us this already. 2021, he made less progress, but he is still moving forward. So if what you care about is the Winds of Winter, then I think the story is the same as it has been for a long time. He is working on it. I think he's probably nearer the end than the beginning, but any speculation on when we get that is probably not really particularly useful. It's going to take a while, and it will take even longer than it would before because of what I'm about to say next, or what George R.R. Martin is about to say next, because what he's previously done is give us a list of priorities in terms of his writing, what he is doing, in which order. And he said very clearly, he told us he was doing the Winds of Winter first, and that is a thing that he was going to finish. Then he would maybe do another Dunk and Egg story. After that, he said he was going to go back into A Dream of Spring, then Fire and Blood. It was very clear, dum, 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 dum. That's the iteration he was going to go down. That seems to have changed. The credit to him for being honest about where his priorities are, but that does seem to have changed. What he said now is that the world of Westeros and the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is my number one priority, and will remain so until the story is told. But Westeros has become bigger than the Winds of Winter, or even A Song of Ice and Fire. And then he goes on to say all the other things that he has to deliver, including Fire and Blood and a few Part 2 and a few other things. Now, this, I think, is the main headline for many of us, is that this is we're no longer, I think, expecting the first thing we see from George R.R. Martin to be the Winds of Winter. The first thing we see from him will be something else. He has been writing, he is continuing to write, but there are other things on his radar that are now equal priority in his mind. The first thing he name checks is Fire and Blood Part 2. We obviously got Fire and Blood Part 1 a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that I really liked. And he has basically said he's already started writing Fire and Blood Part 2. He's done a couple of 100 pages of it. He says there's a lot more to go, which sounds about right. The Fire and Blood Part 1 was 700 and something pages, so if it's about the same length there, then he's still got a reasonable way to go. But he does seem to really enjoy writing about the Targaryens, so it would not surprise me if this comes sooner than we expect it to. He says that he's considering calling it Blood and Fire rather than Fire and Blood Part 2, which is fine. But that's one of the things on his radar. Another thing on his radar is Dunk and Egg. Because, as was previously announced, there is a Dunk and Egg TV show in the works. I'll talk about that in a second. And perhaps stung by what happened with A Song of Ice and Fire, he's quite keen to get on and deliver the Dunk and Egg stories before the TV show catches up to them. So, again, expect Dunk and Egg to come sooner than perhaps we were previously expecting. I'm quite excited about that. We had very previously, quite a few years ago, been told that he'd half written Dunk and Egg 4 anyway. We had a title, The She-Wolves of Winterfell. So I don't think, and they're short stories or novellas. So I don't think it would take as long as writing any of the other books for him to be producing a Dunk and Egg story. So expect one or two of them coming at some point in the next couple of years, I would anticipate. He's also name-checked another couple of wider world things that he's got going on. He's got a lavish coffee table book, an illustrated condensed version of Fire and Blood, which sounds nice. And also another book after that, a Who's Who of Westeros. So he's name-checked 5 books there that he's working on. He doesn't seem to be prioritizing the Winds of Winter over any of those other ones. So I think we could expect to see, well, he's told us that this condensed illustrated version of Fire and Blood will be out later in the year. The Who's Who will arrive after that. So expect a few of these things definitely to be coming out over the course of the next year or two. Then he talks about the TV shows. And again, this is really interesting. He says that these have taken a ton of his time and attention this year. He says, I have seen some comments out there questioning how much I'm involved in these new series. The answer is a lot. And that is emphasized. He's both put it in bold and italics. He says, deeply, heavily involved in every one of the new shows. And the reason being keeping things canonical, he says. Again, perhaps burned by what happened on the main TV show. I don't know. That would just be speculation. But he is working on these TV shows. And when he gets into the TV shows, we'll find out that there's actually quite a few of them. House of the Dragon, he's talked about before. We know that has finished filming. They're in post-production. No real updates on that yet. We haven't had a full trailer for that yet. I mean, it's possible we see that in the summer. I think the autumn is also looking reasonably likely, but that will happen this year. Beyond that, though, he name-checks 3 live action TV shows. The first one is, and all 3 of them have got a named person attached to them, which is quite important because that shows that this isn't just the realms of people pitching ideas and maybe they'll go for this, maybe they'll go for that. These are things actively being developed to the point at which the artistic talent attached to them is happy for their name to be attached to them. They're happy for this to be known. And the first, there's nothing new here in this, what he says. We have got what was known as 9 Voyages, but is now going to be called The Sea Snake. This is called as Velaryon. Bruno Heller, who was the brains behind Rome, which was a TV show quite a long time ago that I know George R. R. Martin was a fan of. He is apparently heading up that. We've got 10,000 Ships, which is the Nymeria story. Amanda Siegel is the showrunner there. And then we get the live-action Dunk and Egg series helmed by Steve Conrad. I don't know Steve Conrad or Amanda Siegel really at all, so I'm very happy for anyone in the chat if they've got any inside knowledge on them. That would be fascinating. But George R. R. Martin seems very happy with all of this. The interesting thing with Duncan Egg is that he talks about this being, for Duncan Egg being the first season will be an adaptation of the first novella, The Hedge Knight. So they seem to be doing a whole season of this TV show for one novella, which seems to imply they've got 3 stories so far, that they've got 3 seasons worth, that they would be working season per novella, which I mean, I don't know. In my mind, they had these as sort of feature-length things, each one as a novella. I can understand stretching it a bit if it's a short series. What I probably wouldn't want myself is having a very long series, but it's still very early days. Of these 3, though, they all seem to be relatively advanced, but of the 3, the Nymeria one seems perhaps to be the furthest. He says that Amanda Siegel has developed a couple of drafts of that one, and we are forging ahead, he says. The one about Corlys Velaryon saying that he's writing a pilot script. Bruno Heller is writing a pilot script for it, which seems slightly less advanced. And the Duncan Egg series seems probably a little bit behind that. So if I had to guess, perhaps the Nymeria one first, but that's still a long way. They've not even greenlit it yet. So after that, they'd have to do filming and post-production. So we're still see anything in 2022. Certainly not going to see anything, I think, in 2023. 2024 is the earliest we will see any of these. But when they start rolling out, and none of these are greenlit and confirmed yet, but when they start rolling out, we will see quite a few of them happening in a short space of time. In addition to that, I told you this was a big update. Animation. We have got some animated series. One of which he talks about is one called The Golden Empire, which is going to be set in Yi Ti. And doesn't name who that is, but he says we have a great young writer on that one too. He says other animated shows, so it implies that there are at least 2 more there. There might well even be more main live action TV shows. We're not told about that either. He name checks a few of the other projects he's got going on, but basically there is a lot. So he has got huge amounts of these different projects. He is very heavily involved in all of them. The bad news, if I were to kind of summarize this, the bad news, I think, is with The Winds of Winter. He has made less progress this year. I think it's reasonably clear because his priorities have changed and he's now spending more time doing other things. It's his time. That's what he's decided to do. But we're going to get The Winds of Winter later than we were otherwise going to get it. The good news, I think, is that we're going to get the things like Duncan Egg and Fire and Blood Part 2 sooner than we thought we were going to be getting them. I'm very happy with that myself. I like both of those things, so I'm pleased about that. Also, I think the good news is the fact that he is taking a very hands-on approach with the TV shows. One intriguing little detail in there that he talks about them having different tones, which is going to be quite interesting because clearly House of the Dragon, from what we've seen, it's going to have the same sort of feel as the main Game of Thrones show, by which I mean, yes, it's obviously the same sort of setting. This is Targaryens on dragons. It's politicking. It's war. He talks about it being sort of dark and moody, but broadly speaking, it seems to be roughly the same. But the other ones may not be the same. Might we see some slightly more comedic? Might we see some more family friendly? Might we see some more horror? All of these things are possible, but he is definitely very clear that the style, the way that these stories are going to be presented will be different in all of these different offshoots of his world. So a mixed bag there. I'm sure there are lots of. I'll have a quick flick through the comments in just 1 second. I'm sure lots of thoughts about all of that. But he is working. Is the short answer. We know that he has been writing. He has been doing a lot of different things, and yeah, it's. I think we just have to accept it for what it is. I'm disappointed about the speed at which the Winds of Winter is coming, but this is his story. He can write it the speed at which he wishes to write it. I am excited about Dunk and Egg. I'm excited about Fire and Blood Part 2. And yeah, I'm also excited about the TV shows. Let's have a quick look through the chat. Zyro Gaming saying Summerhall will be the last season of Dunk and Egg. Yeah, well, that's definitely what George R. Martin has said with Dunk and Egg. This is going to be going all the way, telling their life stories all the way to the end. They both died at the tragedy of Summerhall, said that will be the last Dunk and Egg story. Of course, that period will be covered in Fire and Blood Part 2. It is the death of a Targaryen king. After all, I suspect, assuming that comes out before the end of the Dunk and Egg stories, that will be dealt with in the same way as it was in the World of Ice and Fire, which was quite fudging it. He went even as far as to say, well, we have got this report, but somebody's spilt lots of ink all over it and we can only make out a few words. It's deliberately leaving it vague and open for him to write the story later. So yes, the last one would definitely be going all the way up to Summerhall. Mara Lee, hi there, Mara, saying, I'm glad that George R. R. Martin will be more hands-on regarding the shows. And the Bird Gang saying the third Blackfire Rebellion and Fire and Blood Part 2. Yes, I think there's a big focus. Fire and Blood Part 2, or Blood and Fire, if that's what he ends up calling it, will have a huge amount of focus on the Blackfire Rebellions, the Great Bastards. That is going to be the equivalent of the Dance of the Dragons was in Fire and Blood Part 1. There are other stories in there, but that was the main sort of focus. That's where the sort of the dramatic heart of it often was. Evan Berkovitz saying, what do you make of George R. R. Martin's not a blog post from 4-ish hours ago called Things Are Hoppin'? That's just a picture of plastic frogs. I don't know, but tell you what, I'll do a live reaction because I've not seen this one. Let's see what it says. This is George R. R. Martin just saying things are hopping. So the thing you have to look out for, and this is just a picture, as you say, of some plastic frogs, 8 of them, and it says the things you have to look out for with these blog posts. George R. R. Martin, he has fun with them. The first is that he puts a little picture at the top of them, which is often of himself or something else, which is often sort of tangentially related to what's going on. And secondly, you have to look at the tags for what the context is. The tags are HBO and television. Now, hopping frogs, I don't know what the frog reference could be, but 8 is certainly something that he has done and tagged before on his blog. He was, I don't know, 6 months ago, he put a picture of somebody holding up a hand with 8 fingers on it, and again tagged HBO and television. I thought at the time that was probably because he had 8 projects on the go with HBO. That still seems likely to me here. We've got 8 frogs. If they're hopping, they're moving, so there are 8 things on the go. So that would be my guess. That's just him in a kind of a random way saying that there are 8 different things. Now, what do we know about? We've got House of the Dragon, we've got Corlys Velaryon, we've got Nymeria, we've got Dunk and Egg, we've got Yi Ti. That's 5. we know that there are at least 2 more animated ones. So that's 6 and 7. So I think what he's basically hinting is that there's another one in the works somewhere that is alive. The symbolism of the frogs, I'll let other people perhaps speculate there. Thomas the Kirschmacher saying the frog has 8 heads. Yeah, absolutely. There we go. Glenn Thrasher saying, in addition to Rome, Bruno Heller also worked on a pretty fun TV show called The Mentalist, which I really enjoyed as well. Yeah, it was good TV. It was silly fun, it has to be said. Let's have a quick flick back to see any other thoughts. Edward says, oh no, he's doing a 4-book history on House Reed, a shanty of swamps and mosquitoes. Omni Collective Creativity saying the frog is Quentin Martell, if I remember correctly. I don't think he'll be doing a Quentin Martell TV show, but well, yeah, I don't know. Right, let's go to Kraken Tacos is here. Hi there, Kraken Tacos. Great to see you. David Thomas saying, counting 9 frogs, 5 green and 4 red. Oh, you see, this is where my counting is all wrong. Yes, you're right. There are 9 frogs, so maybe there are 9 things on the go now. Maybe the 9th thing has just been confirmed. That would, yeah, that would make for a lot of work. Lord Seth 1000 saying, I'd love Robert's Rebellion to be animated. The Trident would be lit. Yes, absolutely. Taya Thornhill saying it would have been a really great birthday gift if George R. R. Martin said Wins was done, but you can't always get what you want. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. Happy name day to you. Britt Logan, thank you so much for the super chat. I hugely appreciate that. Very generous, Britt. Thank you. Then also I had, before I went live, Mara Lee, thank you very much, saying, in honor of the Great Protector, Smaug, Drogon, and Silverwing, 4 of my favorite dragons in movies, television, and fictional literature. Just a show of love and appreciation for the excellent content and stories on both your channels. Thank you, Mara. You know, so you're in the chat today, so thank you. You know how much I appreciate your generosity, not just here, but across the wider fandom. You're an absolute star. Thank you. And also the super sticker, I think, as well. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of random thoughts. Reflective rambling saying Golden Empire, please get a decent animation company behind it, please. Yeah, I'm sure they will. So this is something that obviously it's in their best interest to get really good ones. Andrew Case saying George R. R. Martin can do what he wants, but it seems the writing priorities have skewed to provide more source material for TV projects above all else. Yeah, that's certainly one way of interpreting it. I think he's wanting, it's not so much providing source material for TV shows. I don't think Fire and Blood Part 2 won't be providing anything for Nymeria, nor indeed really for Corlys Velaryon. His adventures were before that, so don't think so. I mean, Duncan Egg, yes, I think that he cares. He often says how much he cares about Duncan Egg, so I think he doesn't want the TV show overtaking those stories. So yeah, I think that's definitely possible. Okay, let's take question. Marvin Martin talking about dragons. Okay, let's move on to dragons now. I think if you want to talk more about all of these different projects that George R. R. Martin has got going on, then please do just drop some stuff in the chat. I'll pick up as much as I can from the chat as I go on. As I always do, I've got some questions from my patrons that I will be coming to, and I will be trying to pick up things as we go through. What rather I sometimes do is give a little spiel at the beginning. I think this time we'll just do one of these open Q&As and just move around from question. So Marvin Martin saying, a dragon is bigger than a horse. How does one see past in order to steer a dragon? Given the scales, how can whips do any good? Good questions. So this is these are the questions that Dani is finding herself asking. Actually, if we go into the penultimate, perhaps even one before that, chapter for her in A Dance with Dragons, when she gets onto Drogon's back and Drogon flies off, she can't control Drogon, and she's there just going, well, what do I do about this? How do I control this dragon? She starts thinking, well, I'm sure that the Valyrians of old, they had magical horns with which control dragons. Sure enough, as luck would have it, one of those magical horns is making its way towards Meereen as we speak. So this is all good for her. But in terms of how you steer a dragon, there seems to be a lot that we can read between the lines of what we have in Fire and Blood. Seems to be a lot that Dani doesn't have and doesn't know. There certainly seem to have been saddles. There certainly seem to be chains. The key to this, I suspect, is going to be Tyrion. Tyrion, and we talked a bit about Tyrion last time, the idea of Tyrion Targaryen, I'm not going to go down that route, but what I will say is that George R. Martin has definitely set him up to be the expert on dragon lore for us in the story. I'm sure the Citadel knows more than him, but out of the characters we have, he's the main one. He was writing on the Shy Maid when he was heading down the River Rhoyne. He was writing the book about dragons. He was writing everything he knew about dragons. And he is going to get to Meereen. There's going to be a couple of dragons there already. And then Dani's going to come back with a dragon. And he will be the person who will be able to say, okay, this is how you ride a dragon. The theory. He won't have the practice. Dani will have the practice, but he will have the theory. We already know that he's had building the saddle for Bran. With retrospect, maybe a bit of foreshadowing for building a saddle for Drogon that Dani can sit on. How do you see past a dragon's neck? Well, perhaps you need to be seated up high. In terms of a whip, well, maybe it's the horn you use rather than a whip, but maybe that is just to say, go this direction, go that direction. I'm not a horseman myself, but as I understand it, the idea of the whip, yes, obviously the horse has to be able to feel it, but it's more a directional thing or an instructional thing rather than anything else. So that is perhaps where that is going. I think that we will see Tyrion giving directions on how to do this. The other interesting thing, as a complete aside, but it will definitely happen, is those books. If you cast your mind back to the very beginning of Dani's wedding, Jorah gives her a wedding gift. He brings some books from Westeros, and she thanks him a lot. And then she doesn't read them. And somebody pointed this out a long time ago when George R. R. Martin was still answering questions, and somebody pointed this out and said, what did happen to them? Did she read anything in these books? What's going on there? And George R. R. Martin said, no, she's not really much of a reader, Dani. But you know who is? Tyrion. And you know who's going to Meereen? Tyrion. So we can expect that Tyrion will read those books, whatever it was that Jorah provided, and we still don't know what it was, and he will get information from them. Maybe there will be some more dragon information in there as well. Let's go. I think I had another couple of questions in here. Sabrina Temi saying, hey, Robert, could Dani ride her other two dragons if she wanted to? I feel as if her bond with her dragons is special, as she hatched all three of them from stone. Surely they wouldn't throw her off. Well, we don't know. This is one of these bits of dragon lore that we don't know. What we do know is that all the way through the time of the Targaryens in Westeros, It was one dragon for one person, and that did seem to form a bond 1-to-1. During that, though, the hatching of dragons was this was just like a normal thing. It was just like eggs hatching. You didn't have to do anything special to them. This was just, they didn't even think about it. They just, I wonder when this egg's going to hatch. Dany hatching those 3 dragons was a very, very different thing. George R. R. Martin talks about it as being this sort of confluence of the exact right things at the exact right time. So this was a special moment, which means that she has got a special bond with them. She calls herself Mother of Dragons, and that does work. So could she theoretically ride those other dragons? Potentially, yes, but she can't in practice ride all 3 at the same time. So I think that we will see her stick to Drogon, and then other people will be riding the other dragons. So we don't have chapter and verse on the lore on this one, is the honest answer. George R. R. Martin has deliberately not given us that. But I think the theory would say that maybe she could, but we don't know that. David Thomas, is there any indication about the stone dragon Melisandre plans to awaken? Yeah, this is a bit of a mystery. So dragons awakening from stone, what does this mean? This is a prophecy that she sort of quotes. Now, the implication might be that she initially thought that this was Dragonstone because there are lots of stone dragons there, but obviously they didn't. But then what does awakening from dragon awakening from stone mean? Dany was born on Dragonstone. She is a dragon coming from stone. Is that what that means? Are we expecting? I've talked elsewhere about stone statues coming to life. What if my theorizing about the Winterfell statues coming to life is true? And we know that some statues in Winterfell, there's lots of gargoyles there. Is this dragons? Has Melisandre, she's not always the best or most accurate when it comes to prophecy. She sort of does the things that she thinks is interprets it in the ways that she wants to, is probably the best way of saying it. Maybe it wasn't just stone dragons, maybe it is just stone creatures. Who knows? So there are lots of different possibilities here. This is one of those things with Azor, because it's all wrapped up in the Azor Ahai prophecies. This is one of those things that George R. R. Martin is going to leave open for many, many different interpretations. The most obvious one, it has to be said, is the Dany hatching those 3 dragon eggs. They are repeatedly talked about as being stone. And in that last chapter in A Game of Thrones, when they hatch, it is stone cracking is what we hear. So this is dragons from stone. So that's the most obvious plain text reading of what we've got going on here. But there are others that you could draw out if you were looking for them. Question from Anna Buys saying, thank you for your very classy, high-quality content. Well, thank you. Would you comment your take on dragon intelligence? If they're smarter than humans, why do they allow the Targaryens to destroy them for their own gain? Yeah, this is an interesting one, because they clearly are intelligent, but not in our sort of intelligence, not in a human intelligence kind of way. I think that's where my kind of it feels like a cop out, but I actually don't think this is. Dragons are magical beings. They're different to absolutely everything else. So there is an element of the creature, so a clever creature, but there is something more there. Their brains should operate in a different way to everyone and everything else. That means that they are cunning, they're clever, they know what they're doing, and they can form this bond that does lead to some sort of degree of magical mental connection. There's lots of different sort of references, particularly in Fire and Blood, of when a dragon rider dies and the dragon's not there, then the dragon starts howling, that kind of thing. It's very strong. So are they intelligent? Yes, they do appear to be intelligent. Are they intelligent as we are? No, they might be as intelligent as humans, but in a different way. I think that's what I would say there. It is quite interesting, just as a sort of move across into Tolkien's world for one moment. I was doing a video about Smaug, and it's very obvious when you start going through there. Tolkien's dragons were deliberately clever. Smaug, he could talk, but also he could figure stuff out. Tolkien showed him reading between the lines of what Bilbo was saying in that story, figuring out what was happening, and then going and doing stuff on that basis. So he was shown as having a lot more of an anthropomorphized sort of intelligence, the kind of intelligence that we would understand, whereas George R.R. Martin's dragon intelligence seems to be one that we wouldn't necessarily understand. Roman Lakovets, thank you very much, saying when Bran has his first vision in the Game of Thrones, he sees dragons stirring beneath the sunrise in a shy. Is this literal or symbolic? Are there dragons in a shy? Okay, this maybe, and it's possible that I had Aziz on last week, and we were talking about book one, which is where this comes from, and he says on his channel, on his podcast, they've been going for a very long time, highly respected, that they've come up with this word, this phrase for foreshadowing that actually George R.R. Martin abandoned, because he changed his conception of what the book was going to be, or the books were going to be, what the story was going to be. His original idea was very different to the idea that finally ended up on the page, and obviously he expanded it, added in new layers. A lot of things got dropped. One of those things was the 5-year time gap many people know about. Another one of them is Dany going to a shy. This was clearly what he had originally said, and he said as much. His original idea was that Dany was going to go to a shy, and his very original idea for her was that she wasn't hatching the dragons where she hatched the dragons in the final story, but she would, and I'm doing a video on this, might even come out on Monday, what George R. Martin's original plan was, because we've got his original letter to his agent saying, hey, I've got a great idea for a fantasy story. And in his very first idea, Dany actually killed Drogo in revenge for him killing Viserys, and then she goes on the run. And she goes on the run and heads all the way over to the Far East, Shy being in the Far East, and that's where she stumbles across some dragon eggs and hatches at least one of them. So that was the original plan. Dragons were going to come from the Far East, and that seems to have moved across or had an echo in Illyrio Mopatis talking about these dragon eggs he was giving. These were from the Shadowlands beyond Ashai. So that seems to be, as Aziz Nasher would say, foreshadowing. This is echoes of a story that George R. R. Martin thought he was writing, but then changed. Now, in terms of this section here, we've got with Bran, dragons stirring beneath the sunrise. Is this literal or symbolic? Are there dragons in the Shire? I think the answer is there may well have been at some point, but this is foreshadowing of the dragons being born in the east from where Bran is, looking across to the Far East. That for those who don't remember, Bran has this fantastic kind of vision where he kind of sees the world, and he looks south and he sees his family and the dangers that are going on there. He looks east and he sees effectively the dragons, the threat of the dragons. He looks north and he sees the threat from the others. So that's what's happening at a very high level there. This is the idea George R. Martin had to start with, which he has pretty much stuck with, as far as we can tell. 3 threats. He had originally 3 books. Threat 1 in book 1 was going to be the civil war going on between the Lannisters and the Starks. Threat 2 was going to be the dragons, and the threat 3 was going to be the others. And this was Bran seeing these threats to civilization, to humanity, basically. Catherine Davidson, giving me the knowledge I wanted in terms of horsewhips. Do not hit the animal. They make a cracking sound to startle or gain attention. The horse crop is a very mild thing meant to be felt, but barely stings. Thank you very much. There we go. So that's what it is. It's more about the sound or feeling rather than hurting. Excellent. I think I had another question, if I can find it. Yep, here we go. I've got a question from Marvin Martin saying, if Sunfire was maimed and flew like a chicken, according to Mushroom, how could he outfly, fight, and kill the Grey Ghost? It's a very good question, but this is about dragon sizes. We don't really see this and feel this when we're thinking about dragons in the main story, because all of the dragons, broadly speaking, are the same age and size. Drogon is developing the books. He's developing faster now. He is bigger. The other 2 dragons were kept in captivity for a bit, so he is getting bigger. But it is a huge issue when you start going back into Fire and Blood, is how old a dragon is, how big a dragon is. The issue, one of the issues in the Dance of the Dragons, was the fact that although the blacks had a huge advantage in numbers of dragons, they had a disadvantage in the fact that most of their dragons were much younger and had much less experienced dragon riders. So it's a big balancing equation. We'll see this when we get House of the Dragon. I hope that they will show us this. Some, particularly Vhagar, massive, and that was the thing that scared everybody on the black side, because Vhagar was so much more big and powerful and could take on several of the other dragons just by itself. So that's the deal. This is a matter of age and size and ferocity of a dragon. Let's go to a question from Cloaked One. Thank you very much. Picking up a question. I love it when you do this. Thank you very much. Picking up a question from Milo Connor, saying, if George R. R. Martin was inspired by that quote of world ending in ice or fire, is it possible for dragons to go mad or uncontrollably reproduce to be as much a world-ending danger as the others? I think George R. R. Martin would probably say, in terms of human life, 3 dragons, they are as big a threat as the others. I think that's what he would probably say. Now, it's a matter of who is controlling them, what's going on there, what are they being used for. But if in that age, if you exclude potential for magic, 3 dragons flying overhead, breathing fire down on armies, the armies would be decimated straight away. This is what the big lesson we get from Aegon the Conqueror. George R. R. Martin emphasizes this quite a lot, particularly in Fire and Blood, but also elsewhere. Harrenhal is absolutely, the castle itself is melted, and this is not just a Oh, well, that's a cool thing that happened. This was the greatest castle that humanity had ever built. It just couldn't even withstand one dragon. So nowhere was safe. The Eyrie, the most indomitable place, no army could reach the Eyrie. A dragon just landed on the top. You get the Field of Fire. Two of the largest armies possible, imagine, come together to face the Targaryens. They're huge. The Targaryen army hugely outnumbered, but the dragons come and just obliterate the opposition. It was not a fair battle. Once the dragons were there, if they were used to destroy, they would destroy. So that is what George R. R. Martin, I think, is saying, is that this is, yes, they might start out being small and only be able to do little bits of damage, but 3 dragons could themselves destroy huge amounts of the population. Cloaked One, again, picking up a question for somebody else. Thank you. So this is for Yassine Reis El Feni, saying, "Hey, Robert, I was wondering if there is any evidence that supports Septon Barth's belief that dragons can change to male or female at need, as mutable as flame. Thanks." Well, he clearly thought there was. We're not really told huge amounts about this. The Septons, the Maesters clearly thought not, but they disputed almost everything the Septon Bath came up with. Is there any evidence? Well, all sorts of dragons seem to have eggs, so that certainly seems to be possible. The linguistic issue is there as well. When you get someone like Maester Aemon and he talks about the prince that was promised, actually this could be the princess that was promised, because the language could, and this is talking about dragons, he thinks dragon can be male or female. It could be either. The linguistic cues and clues are there that perhaps this may well be the case. A general rule of thumb is that if Septon Bath thinks something is the case, it probably is. It's just that the Maesters don't like the idea. So yes, the hints are there. We haven't had a detailed anatomy of dragons. We're probably not going to get a detailed anatomy of dragons, but it's all of the clues are that Septon Bath was right. Cloaked One, thank you, picking up for Kelso Sunshine. Do you think there is a hint of skin changing or warging or telepathic connection between dragon and rider? Sort of, but I think that there's a big difference. So we see a lot about warging, skin changing, particularly, say, through Bran. Now, what Bran seems to do is to go into the brain, as it were, of whoever he's skin changing into, and then can either go along for the ride. This is something that Arya seems to very happily do, just go along for the ride, whether it's her own wolf or a cat, or in the case of Hodor, he literally just pushes Hodor to one side. It's really quite horrific when you think about it. He pushes him to one side and just takes control of Hodor's body. So that seems to be a very clear, this is what you're doing. Whereas the dragon bond seems, from what we see with Dany, a lot more instinctive. It's not, she doesn't ever have to sort of sit down and concentrate and saying, right, now I'm going to try and get into Drogon's mind, and that's going to make me. It's a very different thing. So that seems to be, and we've talked about this several times before, the idea that there is something of the dragon about Targaryens, about Valyrians, that seems to be linking the two of them. They are the same in some way. So yes, there are similarities, but my feel is that they are different things which are going on there. You have a question from I I've got you to catch up on here, actually. Cloaked One, again, Cloaked One, you're being very generous today. Thank you so much. This is picking something up for Donovan. If Daenerys' 3 dragons are, as we've been led to believe, the only dragons in the world, will dragons die out again in the future because of the tiny population? What would that mean for magic? Well, will they die out again in the future? It's a matter of if they survive. I think I've got a question from one of my patrons about this, but it's a matter of if any of them survive the story. I think either one or none will, is my general take. So if you have one dragon that survives, then they can have a clutch of dragon eggs. I liked the thought. It was just like the dramatic feel when we were all wondering how are they going to end the TV show. I can remember at one point speculating, I wonder whether the last shot of it would be just like a lingering going over and saying, hang on a moment, Drogon's left some dragon eggs, so the whole thing could start again. It's possible as long as there are have been dragons at some point, then dragon eggs could theoretically survive because be there, and if they are, then dragons could hatch again. Because we know that firstly, in the normal course of events, dragon eggs just hatch. They don't need anything special done to them. They happened mostly on Dragonstone, but not always just on Dragonstone, so it doesn't have to be just about where they are. And secondly, we know that even if they get very, very old and do not hatch, there is a chance, if everything is right, if the magic is right, that you can still hatch them even after hundreds of years. So is it possible there will be dragons coming back? I think at the very least in this story, we're going to be in a position where we cannot say for certain that there will be no dragons. And it's entirely possible George R. R. Martin has left the far east, in particular the far east of the map beyond Ashai, as a complete mystery. There may be dragons there still. Who knows? We just have not been told. Chelsea Oliver saying, could it have been some sort of magical barrier that stopped Silverwing crossing the wall, or pure instinct? This is Queen Alysanne, who went to the wall, which is recorded in Fire and Blood, Part 1. She flew up to the wall on her dragon, wanted to fly past the wall. Silverwing would not go. She tried it a few times. Never. Silverwing did not want to go over. Why might this be? You ask if this was a magical barrier. I think that is the most obvious answer. The wall is not just a physical wall to prevent people going past. When it started out, it was actually normal wall height. It's just over millennia. The Night's Watch just kind of added a bit. They threw a little bit of some more stones onto the top, just to ease their walking along the length of it. They added some ice. They padded it out. It grew a little bit. This happened over millennia and turned it into this massive structure that we have now. It started out as just a wall, but we're told that there are magical barrier spells in the foundations to it. So what we have is a magical barrier, which happens to be marked by a massive physical wall. So it's the magical barrier that was preventing Silverwing going past, or at least that seems the most logical answer, was preventing Silverwing going past. We get other hints about this. The wall is clearly magical. Melisandre talks about how her own magic is amplified simply by being at the wall. We know that Jon, or Ghost more accurately, they can't sense each other when on other sides of the wall. So that seems to present some sort of magical barrier. So it is definitely, I think, a magical barrier. Instinct as well, but it's not. The dragons didn't want to go north because it was cold. Didn't want to go beyond the wall because it couldn't. That's what was happening with Silverwing. Andrew K saying, I hope House of the Dragon goes into a lot of detail and differentiation with the dragons. Look forward to Sunfire's appearance if close to the book description. Yeah, so they have done some concept art. This was a long time ago, maybe a year ago now. They did concept art for 2 or 3 of the dragons, which looked good. I mean, it was only just a little bit here and there. I'll hold off on full judgment till I actually see them. Frankly, they may well not even exist yet. It's in post-production, and the reason why it'll probably take a while in post-production is because putting animated dragons on screen does take a while. But one would hope, would agree with you completely, that they show the differences between the different dragons. Asla or Ale Martinson saying, hello nerds in Deep Geek. I just found your channel a few days ago and I'm addicted. While I work, when I go to sleep, and whatever I do, I'm listening to your videos and loving it. Thank you. Well, thank you very much and welcome. I know a lot of people use my voice to go to sleep too, which I always try my very best to take as a compliment. But it's fantastic to have you. And also anyone, if it's your first time watching this live, please do get involved in the chat. It's a very different experience watching this live to watching it back later. I know a lot of people do watch these back later, but if this is your first time watching it live, then welcome. Ivan R saying, do you ever wonder what happened to the early Targs? They lost 4 dragons and were down to 3 family members, Aegon and his sisters. Yeah, George R. Martin gives a little bit of information about this, but not a lot. Yeah, they came across with 5 dragons, 4 died, 2 were hatched, Balerion being the only one that survived all the way through from Old Valyria. Now, the family came across, it might well be that it was a small family to start with. So that, I mean, we're not told huge amounts of names, so it's entirely possible. But once they were there, they were only wanting to intermarry with themselves, basically, or possibly House Velaryon. We know that at least once they intermarried with House Velaryon, but they didn't want to lose the purity of their Valyrian inheritance. So that seems to be what has happened, is that there probably weren't many to start with, and then rather than marrying out, they married in, so to speak, which means that for a brother and sister, very icky, obviously, but rather than having one person marry out and creating one family over there and another person marrying out and creating another family over there, so you have 2 families, they just come back in together and keep that one family going. So yeah, I think it's as simple as that. Cloaked One again, thank you, saying, for Brian Copps, is the decision making of dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire driven by natural instincts or rational, if not magic? A bit of both, I think. Certainly there is a lot of instinctive stuff that we see from Dany's dragons. Particularly the Drogon is probably a slightly different case, but the other 2 dragons, we see a huge amount of just instinctive doing what they want and need to do. But also you get, they're hungry, they go and kill sheep. That's just what dragons do. They're not there thinking, oh, I wonder whether this is going to cause a bit of a political problem for Dany. They are driven by instinct a lot of the time because they are creatures, but they are magical creatures. So it's hard to say exactly what it is or what the breakdown is, but when you get that bond between the rider and the dragon, they clearly seem to be able to control where a dragon goes. And the Targaryens, it's worth saying, yes, Dany was thinking about how can I get a magical dragon horn, but the Targaryens we read about in Fire and Blood, they didn't seem to use magical dragon horns, and they seem to be able to make their dragons go where they wanted to. It was about this magical bond. So it's more about the link across to their rider, which gives them the sort of the more human intelligence, I think, but that's through a sort of a magical link. Jewel Elson picking up for Kelso Sunshine. People are being very generous today. Thank you so much. Saying, I want to know what called Balerion home to Valyria. Was it some kind of homing beacon, or was he reminiscing when he was set free and he just wanted to hop over for a visit? Yeah, this is Princess Aria, who we read about in Fire and Blood. It's really quite a tragic story and also quite horrific, as close, I think, as George R. R. Martin got to horror in his A Song of Ice and Fire world. But she was just a child. She wanted to ride a dragon. She was, and it's worth saying, Princess Aria, again, George R. R. Martin, particularly through Fire and Blood, he emphasized again and again the fact that women were never acknowledged as being rulers of Westeros, even though a lot of the time they either were or should have been. Princess Aria was twice recognized heir to the throne. She never inherited, though. But be that as it may, she decided on the basis of this that she wanted to ride Balerion the Black Dread, which is crazy, but Balerion the Black Dread, obviously the oldest, the most legendary, the fiercest dragon there was. She could not control it. It had not had a rider for quite some time, and seemed to be spending most of its time just sort of sleeping. Old. Balerion was old at the time, so we don't know huge amounts about how dragons age, but there is a kind of a hint of, like, imagine a kind of an old man just like napping in an armchair. That's the kind of feeling we have. But this isn't an old man. This is an incredibly powerful dragon. Anyway, she climbs onto Balerion. Balerion flies off. People don't know where it's gone. She's clearly not controlling it. Balerion seems to go over to Valyria. Horrible things. And then flies back. Why is that? You said you were asking whether it's some sort of homing beacon, reminiscing when he was set free, just wanted to hop over for a visit. I think it was just the equivalent of being an old dragon, and I don't know whether. Certainly, when I read it, that this felt a little bit like. And this is probably the wrong sort of analogy, but I'm almost like a dementia kind of feel for dragons, in the sense that a lot of the time when people go through that as humans, the things that they remember are the things from their childhood, not the things from when they were grown up. And that's the kind of feel that I think George R. R. Martin was wanting us to have and to understand, was that Balerion was just going back home because that's what was there. That was what felt most real, and it was just going back home. And it was only once got there, this isn't home, and then came back to King's Landing. So that, I think, was what was going on there. Not sort of a homing beacon or anything. That it's just, I think it was I think we're even supposed to feel a little bit sorry for Balerion, certainly for Princess Aria, who horrific things happened to. Evan Berkowitz, really interesting point here in the chat, talking about a hint from Dany learning to ride her Silver. This is her horse, saying it was the filly who was her real teacher. The horse seemed to know her moods as if they shared a single mind. Yeah, if you go back over those initial 2 or 3 chapters for Daenerys, you'll find there's one chapter in particular where, as the wedding chapter, where the imagery you cannot get past. This is she gets on the horse. We get this here, but also she rides around. She feels like she's flying, and then it jumps over the flames, and the image is very, very clear. This is us supposed to be thinking, foreshadowing of Drogon, but very much, as you say, this kind of idea of one mind. That's something George R. R. Martin is trying to is trying to sort of give us the idea of. Let's just trying to find. I think I'm a little bit of catching up to do on the questions. Another one here from Ramon Cavalcanti saying, "Greetings from Brazil." Greetings back, Brazil. I would love to have the opportunity to see stories playing out in Valyria. I confess I have a hard time imagining society with so many families vying for power with so many dragons. Yeah, this was one of the original ideas. Now, we were talking at the beginning of the stream about all these different potential shows. One of the ideas that they were at one point bandying around was this idea of Valyria, of the politicking in the height of old Valyria. That idea seems to have fallen by the wayside, but yeah, I think I would have loved it too. It would have been one of those things, it has to be said, and I don't think this is a problem so much, but it's something we just need to be aware of, which is the further away from the books we get, then the less of an adaptation we've got, and the more of a inspired by we will have. What I mean by that is, let's ignore the last few seasons of Game of Thrones for the moment. The first season of Game of Thrones is almost scene for scene from book one. It's not exact. There are a few extra scenes. There are a few things they missed out, but it was an attempt to map a book onto a season of a TV show. And it was pretty, they used a lot of the same dialogue. It was pretty close. When you start going from that situation to what we're going to have with House of the Dragon, that you have book one. I don't know how many pages are in book one, but let's say it's 700 or so. That you use those words to create one TV show. House of the Dragon is going to be based on the Dance of the Dragons, which is couple of hundred pages in Fire and Blood. And that is going to be turned not just into one season, but perhaps 5 seasons. So you've got source material still, but it's stretched a lot thinner. So what we will find with House of the Dragon is that there's not so much original dialogue going on. I'm sure where they have original dialogue, they will use it, but there won't be so much of it. And there will be a lot more new characters, subplots, things just to tie it all together. When you go to something like Nymeria, you find that, what do we know about Nymeria? Well, we've got a few pages. I mean, I haven't counted how many pages there are in the World of Ice and Fire about Nymeria, but I don't know, 5 or 10? It's not a massive amount. So again, if you're going to make a TV show from that, you will have to come up with almost all of the characters. We know the names of a couple of the Rhoynish, and then a few of the Dornish, but most of the characters you would have to create almost completely from scratch. When you go to something about old Valyria, almost everything will be completely new. So this is, and I'm okay with this. I know a lot of people then start, so this is just fan fiction or whatever. Of course, all TV adaptations are fan fiction in one way, shape, or form, but we do have to be aware that the further we're moving away from the core stories, the more emphasis is placed on the showrunners and writers to be creating something that works. And this is why George R. R. Martin's involvement in all of these TV shows is important, because he obviously is, and he's very clear, it's to make sure that everything is canonical, his words. But in answer to the basic question, yes, I would also love to see a TV show along those lines. Travis Lopez saying, "Wow, I actually made it to a live stream. Thank you so much for such amazing content. Huge fan. Thank you." Well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Mara Lee, hi again, Mara, saying, why does Melisandre wish to awaken the stone dragons on behalf of King Stannis using King's blood? Whose blood would she have used and why? So Melisandre wants to fulfill the prophecies around Azor Ahai, and she wants to make them happen. If they're not happening already, she wants to make them happen. When Stannis gets his sword, Lightbringer, that's her doing a magical trick to make this sword look fiery. Maester Aemon says, can I see this sword? And Maester Aemon can't see, but he felt that there's no heat coming from it and said that's not Lightbringer. This is Melisandre who is creating some magic tricks, and this is what she is doing in terms of the creating waking stone dragons. In terms of King's blood, she uses Edric Storm's King's blood, but she would happily, I think, use King's blood from wherever she could get it. She will. This is why the Shireen thing, incidentally, why the Shireen thing is so important, because for her, it's not that Melisandre just doesn't like Shireen. Melisandre sees Shireen as the only, where she is at the wall, the only real access to King's blood that she knows of. She doesn't know about Jon Snow, obviously. She will see Shireen. This is the daughter of a king. This is the heir to the king. And so her blood is hugely, hugely powerful, will be what Melisandre thinks. So the short answer is Melisandre will use whatever King's blood she can get her hands on. Frown Pouch saying, no question, just thanks from a patron and fan. Hope you're well. Thank you very much. I am very well. Thank you. And a question from Reflective Rambling saying, hey, at least it was an active choice marrying in, unlike some characters that cough, and cough. Yeah, let's not go there. That's a Tolkien reference. For those who are unaware, Roman Lakovitz, thank you, saying, how did the small folk of Westeros react to a bunch of terrifying beasts flying around? Terrified. We're not told, again, it doesn't tell us much about how the small folk react to stuff. We see it with Dany's dragons. People are scared of them, rightly so. They kill a lot of human beings, those dragons, and I think it's right for people to be scared. In terms of during the time of Fire and Blood, people, again, they were scared. In King's Landing, people became used to the idea, particularly in Dragonstone, they became used to. In King's Landing, people became used to the idea. But what you see with the storming of the Dragon Pit is actually that only worked because of this deep dislike of having dragons there in the middle of your city, because they're dangerous creatures, and that there were thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, who were willing to risk their lives to get rid of those dragons. There was a religious fervor thing going on, but also people just didn't want that. People were scared, and rightly so. Let's go to a question from Kryptonian. Wouldn't it be an amazing little detail if certain Valyrian blades would have creative traits, similar to Muramasa blades having a thirst for blood and enhancing their wielders to a mythical status? Yeah, so it would work well. I mean, I think George R. R. Martin, he goes a long way to try and make each of these Valyrian steel blades feel different. But the idea of making them have each blade having its own personal character, he didn't really go down that route. The Elric of Melniboné thing will have been high in his mind. He was clearly thinking about that character when he was thinking about characters like Bloodraven. So the idea of having a sword with some kind of soul in it, some kind of thirst or something in it, he will have thought about it, but we haven't really seen that here. I agree it would be cool though. Ultraviolet saying, is something implied about Dany's genetic makeup because she gave birth to a dragon-like humanoid? Yeah, so she's not alone in this. Rhaegal, her child, who is born. We never see this child, but we hear from good sources. It's not just Miri Mazdur. This is also Jorah who says so. The child was born deformed and quite dragonish. Now, we're left to be uncertain about exactly why that is at that point in the plot. Was it because Dany went into that tent that she'd been warned not to be fair, by Miri Mazdur, and in that tent was death? Was that what caused that? We don't know. But when you go back through in the World of Ice and Fire, in Fire and Blood, you find this happens lots of times. Targaryens, stories of Targaryens having children that are a bit dragony, to put it that way, with like hints of wings or tails or something like that. So is there a hint here about her genetic makeup? Yes, there is, but it's a hint that goes across the piece for all of the Targaryens, I would say. Oh, have you got Sanrixian in the... Yeah, Sanrixian's here. Hi there. I've been silently busting out... Oh, you're working on season 13 of Archer. Excellent. For those of you who don't know, Sanrixian is one of the excellent, wonderful artists that we have in this community of Song of Ice and Fire, and as she says there, works on Archer. So if you're a fan of Archer, then you will have seen Sanrixian's work. And I would highly recommend you go and check out her website. I'm sure one of the moderators will put a link into the chat. Another question from MM. Bit of a topic change. Do you think Maester Aemon knows more about Jon than he's letting on? That's an interesting one. I don't think he knows who he is, if that's what you're asking. I think that he understands who he is because of the links between them in terms of the challenges that they each will face. At the Wall, it's quite rare to get the kind of people that they are there. Yes, you get this huge mix of people at the Wall, but actually to have somebody who's from one of the top noble houses in Westeros sending somebody up there, there's only a few, but so they often seem to sort of get on a bit and understand a bit of each other. And Maester Aemon certainly understands, particularly about Jon's temptations to leave the Wall because of the war, because he had a very similar experience. So I think so for him it was Robert's Rebellion. He saw his family being killed and he wanted to go and help, but for Jon this was the War of the Five Kings, and so he wanted to go off and help in that. He sees his family dying and he wants to go and help. So Aemon saw something in him. I think he probably understood a little bit more, and increasingly over time understood a little bit more about Jon. There was something about Jon. Did he know that Jon was Rhaegar's son? No. But did he know there was something going on with Jon? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. Okay. I think I've caught up on the chat now. Oh, Andrew Kay saying, with Arya, this is Arya Targaryen who flew on Balerion. Could the lack of a proper dragon bond be at play with how things ended up for her? Yeah, absolutely. This was a key thing. She just climbed on the dragon, and it's a lot about her character as a person that she did that. I think it tells us who she is as a person. That she just thought, hey, I'll just climb on board this dragon and it'll all be okay. And it wasn't. There wasn't a dragon bond there. But I think it's more that if this had been just a young dragon, perhaps that would have been okay. But she was trying to immediately get on and control and bond with a very old, ancient, powerful dragon, legendary dragon, who had previously had some pretty fearsome owners and or riders. And that just wasn't going to work. She was just an inexperienced young girl who'd never flown on a dragon before. David Thomas saying, have the Velaryon family had similar issues with both deformities, given the common Valyrian roots of each family? Interesting question. We're not told as much about the history of House Velaryon, but there are a couple of instances, I think, in Fire and Blood, but these are connected in with intermarriages with the Targaryens. The difference between the Targaryens and the Velaryons, so they're both from Valyrian ethnicity, effectively, but there seemed to be a difference. We don't know all the ins and outs of Valyrian society, but it seems very clear that the Valyrians were on at least two levels. You get the main Valyrians, and then you get the 40 dragon riding families. That they were the biggest and most powerful. The Targaryens were one of those. House Velaryon were not. They were Valyrians, but they were not dragon riders. Now, what does that mean? Probably it means that the dragonish DNA ran in those dragon riding families, but not in the other ones. Now, when they move across and the Targaryens move across, and there's lots of intermarriage there, the family that the Targaryens married the most, then you start getting a little bit of mixing of those bloodlines. But generally speaking, they're different. Valyrian, but not dragon riding. Okay, let's go with a couple of questions from my patrons. And this picks up on something I was talking about a little bit earlier. Diego Godoy saying, hola, Robert, hola. Do you think one or more dragons will survive to the end of A Song of Ice and Fire? And do you think that if one dragon survives, then at least one other will survive as well, thinking about them as twin threats? Yeah, I think this is a fascinating idea, because what we have to have thematically here is these threats to humanity have to be dealt with. Now, that does not mean wiped out and killed and destroyed necessarily. It might do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every dragon has to die. It doesn't necessarily mean that the others all have to be killed. The threat has to be pushed back in some way. Now, that could be achieved by simply getting to a point, and it's easier to understand how this would happen with the dragons than the others, simply because we do not know yet in the books what is driving the others. But with the dragons, if something happens roughly what happened on the TV show, where you get Drogon who just flies off at the very end of it and seemingly not wanting to return to Westeros, that would provide a thematic end for the main book story as well. So that's entirely possible. Would you need there to be this balance? The same thing happens to both. Now, I think you could kill all of the others and leave one dragon as long as the dragon goes away, or you could kill all the dragons and have the others retreating tactically back as long as we know that they're gone for another few thousand years. That could work. So I don't think we necessarily have to have them balancing, as it were, but they both need to be pushed back in some way. Question from Sylvia Galasso saying, please forgive my unrelated question. I'll drop this one in. I normally do these at the end, but I'll drop this one in here quickly. Where does Mance Rayder come from in Westeros, and why did he end up on the wall? So Mance Rayder, we're told from other people that he is the son of a member of the Watch and a wildling. And there was, at some point, a raid, sort of in retaliation for something, there was a raid by the Night's Watch, and this child, Mance Rayder, was captured and brought back. This apparently is the according to a semi-canonical source, why his surname is Rayder, but that's a by the by. So that's why he was there, and he grew up in the Watch. Now, that's the story we have. We don't have much verification, although I would say there is. There was a time a while ago where there were some theories going around that maybe Mance Rayder was secretly another character in the story, various different ideas about who this other character might be in secret and in hiding. One thing when I was looking at this, pardon me, that I did stumble across was Mance Rayder himself. He went to Winterfell a couple of times, specifically, and saw Jon. One was that time when there was that feast with King Robert, but then also a long time before that, he said that he went there with Lord Commander Corgil, which is interesting because Jon remembers it. A thing happened. He stumbled across him and Rob, who were making snowmen or something like that. Jon remembers this. But we also know when that Lord Commander died, so we can actually put that within a couple of years. And the upshot of that is that Mance Rayder was, as a member of the Night's Watch, in Winterfell, wandering around and mixing with the upper echelons of Winterfell, and probably a matter of less than 5 years after Robert's Rebellion. So I think that reasonably clearly, for me, shows that he was an established member of the Night's Watch at that time and had no fear that any of the people who were at Winterfell and participated in Robert's Rebellion would recognize him. So for me, that's it's a very throwaway comment, but it was verified by Jon as well as what Mance Rayder himself said, and that does seem reasonably clear that he didn't fear that people might recognize who he was. Astra Inclinant saying Mance is Rhaegar. Yeah, that was one of the names that people have come up with. As I say, I love the thinking behind it. I just don't think that the evidence is there, personally. Question from the Hammertime 51 saying, here I was listening to an old live stream while the new one is ongoing. Hello, everyone. Well, you're very welcome to listen. I was going to say, listen to them both, which reminds me, I am simulcasting this. I always forget to say this. My word of the year, simulcasting, if you prefer watching these kinds of things on Twitch. This is going live on Twitch as well. I always follow it up by saying I'm paying attention to the chat here on YouTube rather than on Twitch. But if you prefer Twitch, the option is open for you to go there. And while I'm on a quick pause, patrons, I say it every time, thank you. I cannot do what I do without your support. It means huge amounts to me, allows me to do what I do, and this is partly why I do things like giving priority questions for patrons, and also a few extra little bonuses. So I have recorded, because I inexplicably feel I either didn't record or did record and lost Ariane 2, the chapter. I recorded all of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter. Ariane 2, it seems not to be there, so I've recorded it or re-recorded it, and I just have to edit that and get that uploaded, and I will get that there within the next week, as well as another bonus thing, which is me reading that letter that George R. R. Martin sent to his agent way back when he had, hey, I've got this idea for a fantasy series. If you're interested in what his original plan was, then that will be there available for patrons. So if you do want to support this channel, the best way to do this is through Patreon. There is a link down in the description. Reflective rambling, again, you're being very generous, picking up, thank you, picking up for Marvin Sankpr. Do you think Nettles called her dragon Sheep Stealer or something else? Maybe commonplace name, and she had her own. So did Nettles call it Sheep Stealer or something else? No, I think that this was known as Sheep Stealer because it was known, this dragon was known for taking sheep. And this was her way of bonding with the dragon, was by providing sheep. So Sheep Stealer didn't have to go and find any sheep. She provided the sheep, and that formed a bond, which felt a lot more like between a human and an animal than other kind of like Targaryens just jumping on dragons and forming bonds with them. But yeah, it's the most commonplace name, but you find those dragons are slightly different. I'll come up for this from a slightly different angle. You get the dragons that were flown by the old dragons, the ones that came from Valyria, and the ones a bit after that that were flown by the Targaryens from the start. These ones tend to have these quite, we'll call them Valyrian names: Balerion, Vermax, Vagar, that kind of thing. It's the dragons that come later start getting different names, because the ones that get named, there are some that start getting named by the children who have been given this dragon egg, and then the dragon hatches. So we get Morning, for example. That's a dragon named by a child. But also then we get the dragons that were just hanging around on Dragonstone and nobody was riding them. They some of them got dragon names that were, as you say, a lot more commonplace. So we also get Cannibal, who seems to have been a very old dragon, but was known for killing other dragons. So hence the name Cannibal. So that seems to be what's going on, is that you get the first batch of names, what almost certainly the Valyrians used to call their dragons, that kind of thing. And that kind of started getting phased out to the extent that you would expect if the dragons had carried on in another couple of generations of dragons, and the dragons would start have more often than not having more commonplace names. Dany went back to a slightly different place, in that she slightly used anthropomorphized names for them. So it was Drogon in honor of Drogo, Rhaegal in honor of Rhaegar, Viserion in honor of Viserys. So it is naming them after people. So the naming conventions of dragons, it's probably fair to say, change a lot, and it seems to be quite specific to whoever the person is. They get to decide what they call a dragon. And once the golden era of Valyrian dragons are gone, then it's anyone's game. Okay. Let's go to a question from one of my patrons. Mara Lee saying, it is more than likely we will see Jon Snow get to both meet and ride a dragon. Do you see any other A Song of Ice and Fire character doing the same? So my take is that we will probably, my favorite is Euron. So yeah, I think Jon will probably end up riding the dragon that bears his father's name. I think that's just seems to work well as a sort of foreshadowing for the story. The other, though, which is named after Viserys, who obviously wasn't a very good person, what manner of person could be riding that? Well, on the TV show, they obviously had the Night King, but that's not what's going to be happening in the books, because the Night King in that incarnation is not a book character. And that whole episode where the Night King got, the one with the javelin, and that was all made up by the showrunners. So that is not happening. But it does, I think it works well that a baddie of some kind does ride this other dragon, and my take is probably Euron. I know some people like the idea of Tyrion riding a dragon. I mean, I'd love it, but I think that and there we go. Sleepless JR just saying Tyrion will ride. So it's I like the idea, but I think he's the person who helps other people to ride rather than being the person himself who rides the dragon. That's my take. Okay, let's go to Bear Island. Hello, Robert. Hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. Dan is fast asleep just over there. Do you think pre-Valyrian dragon riders visited Battle Isle? My take is that dragons were bred from wyverns and humans near Asshai, and that after a cataclysm, the few who remained taught the process to Valyrian shepherds. Apologies for any giant moon dragon egg enthusiasts. Yes, so do I think pre-Valyrian dragon riders visited Battle Isle? Yes. So Battle Isle is that island in Old Town that the High Tower is on. Now, why do I think they're there? So that is the oldest settled, as in human settled, place in all of Westeros, as far as we're aware. That was some sort of a trading post. And George R. Martin tells us that at some point dragons were all over the world, so it kind of makes sense that dragons could have been there. This is from way back, Dawn Age, beginning of time. Now, the other clue we've got is the base of the High Tower on Battle Isle. Now, if you saw my Black Stone video that I did a few weeks ago, the way that I broke this down is you get lots of Blackstone appears all over the place in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, but you can actually break it down into a few different types. You get the oily Blackstone, which we're not going to talk about now, but that's in 4 different places. You get this kind of basalty Blackstone, which doesn't seem to be particularly magical or anything. That's often used for castles in Westeros. Then you get 2 different types of fused Blackstone. You get one which is the Valyrian Blackstone, which they used for things like Dragonstone and also the Dragon Roads, the Valyrian Roads. That's fused Blackstone. And then you get this other type, which is also fused Blackstone, but seems to be from a time before the Valyrian Empire. And the 2 examples are the base of the High Tower and the 5 forts. Now, we haven't seen either of those 2 things literally, seen them through somebody's eyes in the story we have had so far. So we have to speculate to a certain element, but it seems to be very similar to the Valyrian fused black stone. That's what it is. It just seems a lot plainer, and it seems to be used just as a base for something. So, or like a defensive structure on Battle Isle and the 5 forts. So my speculation is that this is the same technology. This is it's just an earlier, less refined version, which is what you'd expect, to be honest. Before you can do all of the twiddly stuff that they've got on Dragonstone, you have the very basic, let's just have some fused black stone and we'll make a fort out of it. So that seems to be what's going on there. Did pre-Valyrian dragon riders visit Battle Isle? I think this is just makes absolute sense. In terms of your take that dragons were bred up from wyverns and humans near Ashai, and then the few that remained taught the process to Valyrian shepherds, that it sounds absolutely fair and right to me. It's not. We don't know. We don't have the information, but. And frankly, it won't make huge amounts of difference, I don't think, to the story. But that does make sense. Andrew Kay saying geographically it makes sense as well with Battle Isle. If they wanted to trade and possibly eventually conquer, it works to set up on the periphery first. Yeah, and so Old Town it's at the estuary of the river that heads up into the, I was going to say the best part of Westeros, that's certainly the most fertile part of Westeros. So that is the most logical place to be setting up a trading post. Apathetic God saying, hey, Geek, I found you a few days ago and have binge watched many of your videos. Well, thank you very much and welcome. Chances of a Third Age map vid. It must be a huge undertaking to make. If you're talking about a Third Age in Middle Earth, a video about the world there, I mean, something like that I could definitely do. Reflective Ramblings saying, have you ever shouted out the great mod Ygritte Weirwood's channel? I think I have, but I'm very happy to do it. I have some amazing moderators. We'll do this bit first. I have some amazing moderators. If you are watching this chat live, then, or you're watching the stream live, and if you're in the chat, please thank the moderators because they do a wonderful job. Just show them a little bit of love. That would be hugely wonderful. If the moderators could also drop something in there for Ygritte Weirwood's channel, I have seen it. Excellent stuff. Please do go and check that one out. Also, Amanda is here, the Disputed Lands. Amanda, I bow to Amanda's great knowledge on huge amounts of things, A Song of Ice and Fire. And actually, I will give Amanda, if you're there watching, I gave you a shout out on my Blackstone video that I was talking about a moment ago. The theory that I liked the best when I was looking at what the oily black stone was in Ashai, Amanda already did it more than justice and worked through, I thought, brilliantly in a video that she did. I can't remember the exact name of that video, but I linked to it from my video. So Amanda, thank you very much. I thought it was excellent, and I hope that pushes a few extra views over to you as well. For those who don't know, Disputed Lands, excellent channel all about A Song of Ice and Fire. Right, let's go to another question from one of my patrons, Lawn Duck 20. Did Bran and Summer actually see a dragon above Winterfell in A Clash of Kings? Also, do you think Illyrio has any idea that the dragon eggs he gives Dany could be the ones Alyssa Farman stole? Well, I'll do the second question first. Did Illyrio know that the dragon eggs that he gives Dany could be the ones Alyssa Farman stole? I think in the original conception, this was when I was talking about the foreshadowing, in the original conception that George R. R. Martin had, that wasn't in his mind at all. I think he's very much thinking of dragon eggs coming from the Far East. But on the working assumption that it moved into this idea that he bought them from Bravos, from the Sea Lord of Bravos, and they are Alyssa Farman's ones. I think he will know where they came from. I think that story, although this was 150 or more years ago, or 200 years ago, even from when they were bought again by Illyrio, then I think he probably will know. But I don't think it will make much difference to him. He was just buying some dragon eggs that he could then give to somebody else. They're dead. We look at them now, think these are amazing, magical things. There are dragons in them. That's not what anyone thought at the time. They thought that they were curiosities, things that are just like fossils, effectively. Wow, this is an amazing fossil here, and this is a fossil connected to your family, so here we go. That's the kind of feel that we've got going on here. So yes, he probably knew it was from Alyssa Farman, but it didn't bother him. The Bran and Summer seeing a dragon above Winterfell in A Clash of Kings. This is a perennial question because the language is quite suggestive but also vague. Now, the situation is Winterfell is burning. Bran and co are escaping. They head out. Bran walks into Summer, and we see what's happening through Summer's eyes. And so Summer interprets things differently. So Summer doesn't think about Winterfell as being Winterfell or a castle. It's just piles of stones. But this is what we get. The smoke and ash clouded his eyes. This is Summer's eyes. And in the sky he saw a great winged snake whose roar was a river of flame. He bared his teeth, but then the snake was gone. So that's the reference. And that's all of the reference. There's nothing more. And we get lots of theories. What on earth is going on here? Could this be an actual dragon escaping Winterfell? My take is it's not an actual dragon. There is no actual dragon. If this was an actual dragon, then other people would have spotted it. This wasn't something that was there. This is through Summer's eyes, and we're already told that the smoke and ash were clouding his eyes, so he wasn't seeing things as clearly as he otherwise would. He saw what looked like a great winged snake, fire, so we get smoke and fire forming a dragon shape. That seems to be the logical thing of what was happening, not as an escaping dragon, because nobody else mentioned this, and they would. But it is definitely foreshadowing. It is definitely foreshadowing the fact that there was a dragon in Winterfell, and that is Jon. So that is what I think is going on here. This is foreshadowing about Jon, but I think it's hard to say we put too much emphasis on this, but I think that we make it more of a mystery than I think George R.R. Martin intends it to be. This was, I think, pretty clearly him saying this isn't an actual dragon. He gives an example of Summer looks at something not in the same way as us. When Summer looks at Winterfell and sees it in a different way to humans do, then we get told that smoke and ashes are clouding his eyes, so Summer isn't seeing properly at all. Then we get this dragon vision. So double introduction to it, saying this isn't actually what a human would look at and say it's a dragon. So it's symbolic. And what could it be symbolic of? It has to be Jon, in my mind. Chaos Ballerina, thank you very much. Picking up for Callie Summers. What do you think happened to those early pre-Valyrian Westerosi dragons? Were the children of the forest or others responsible for their disappearance? So the early pre-Valyrian Westerosi dragons. So I think... Well, George R. R. Martin says they ranged all over. He didn't say that they based themselves in Westeros. So my take is that what we had was the dragons were probably still based in the places that we would expect dragons to be based in. Valyria being one of them, maybe Dragonstone, somewhere where it was hot and there were fires and volcanoes and things like that. So generally speaking, there isn't that in Westeros, so that's why there weren't dragons basing themselves there. What happened to them? Well, I think that there were some, and then the Valyrians tamed them and got rid of the ones that weren't theirs because they wanted to have a monopoly on dragons. And then obviously we had the Doom of Valyria. That's sort of skipping over millennia there in one sort of sentence, but I think that's the iteration of events. I like the idea that some people suggest that there might have been some kind of cataclysm, apocalypse. That certainly kind of makes sense, but because there are lots of things, particularly the further east you go, there are lots of things that just feel as if something happened, but we haven't got records of this, so I think we shouldn't. Well, we can speculate, but I don't think that this is going to play a huge part in the story that we have. Reflective Rambling, picking up for the loaf of bread, saying, did dragons evolve or were they engineered? Interesting. So, I mean, I've said several times that I think that the Targaryens or the Valyrians were into some sort of gene splicing. They clearly were trying to, or they clearly loved this idea of chimeras, compound creatures. You see that in a lot of these ancient civilizations in the Song of Ice and Fire, where they had manticores and sphinxes and the bits of different animals together. They seem to have been doing that experimenting with dragons. They seem to have been, the hints are certainly there that this is where there's kind of some sort of gene splicing, our words, probably not the ones they would use because this is going to be all magical, to make themselves have a hint of dragony to them, dragonishness to them. Were the dragons themselves engineered? I think perhaps the dragons that could be ridden definitely were. I think that they created the dragons that could have that link, that bond with humans, particularly the humans that they wanted to be able to ride the dragons. So that was, I think, definitely the case. But there being dragonish creatures at the beginning, I think almost certainly there were already, whether we would call them wyverns, great snakes, I don't know. But I think there were some proto-dragons that the Valyrians and probably people before the Valyrians worked on and engineered to make them into what they wanted them to be. Okay, question from Raging Crocodile saying, do you think that the Valyrian dragons could be domesticated versions of wild dragons? The wild type of dragons might be the ones in the Shadowlands. Yeah, so this was actually very seamless linking across from where I was. So this is the idea, is that to sort of finish that thought process, the wild dragons, I was sort of saying we could call them wyverns, anything, whatever else they are, they may well still be there over in the Far East. George R. R. Martin basically says it then gets very fuzzy the further east you go. We're never going to see that Far East in this story. No one's ever going to go there. Even people like Lummus Longstrider didn't go that far, so we don't have any accounts of what's there. We just have legends and rumors of people who have come back. So there may well be wild dragons, as you would say, there still, and it kind of works with the understanding of the world that we've developed here. Question from Damon Snow, the Black Kelpie of Winterfell. Wow. Saying, hi, Robert, do you think there is a possibility that the bond between Dragon and Dragon Rider works opposite to warging, that Dragon sees in his partner's hand and then knows what he should do? So it's the opposite of the. Whereas warging, skin changing, you go into the mind of the animal. With the dragon bond, the dragon goes into your mind. I think there's an element of it there, but it feels more like being of one mind. That we got that. I've forgotten who it was who had brought up that wonderful little quote from when Dany was riding her silver horse, and we got told it was like they were of one mind. That's the kind of feel that I think George R. R. Martin is wanting us to have. Is it's a joint thing. This isn't a one being forced onto the other. This is a pure bond. So I think that's what it is. I like the idea that they are opposites. It does work for me. I think that the more you start thinking about skin changing, the more you think, actually, this is not good, is it? You just read what Bran does to Hodor, and it just makes you go, "Oh, that's not nice." But this seems more, I don't know whether natural is the right word, because this does seem to have been an engineered thing, but it's more melding of two minds so that both can kind of sense each other a little bit more. Okay, that's, I think we caught up on the chat, so let's go back to some questions from my patrons. Mara Lee saying, we may never know if Tyrion is a secret Targaryen or a true Lannister by birth. I can't wait to see Tyrion's face when he finally gets to meet Dany's 3 dragons. What do you think the dragon's reaction will be meeting Tyrion? Yummy snack or friend? Now, so this builds on what I was saying earlier with Tyrion. Tyrion, regardless of whether he's a Targaryen, he's an expert on dragons. So he will, I think, approach the dragons. That there are 2. Let's not forget the situation that we're coming into is we've got 2 dragons which have basically been released out into the wild above Meereen. Nobody's got any control over them, and what are you going to do about it? Now, Tyrion might be a person who can suggest a way of perhaps, if not taming them, then maybe getting them on side. Certainly when Dany comes back, then he will be able to talk to her, I think, about saddles and things like that. Will they try and eat him? I don't think so, but I don't think he's going to do anything stupid. The point with Quentin Martell is that he was trying to do stupid things. When you read it, this is all from his perspective, but you just see him going in there and just trying to tell them what to do, use a whip, people with swords and weapons coming in. This was not, and these had been captive dragons, so he was being stupid, basically. Tyrion's not going to be stupid. So as a result, he will survive. And I don't think they'll necessarily think of him as a friend, but he will, for example, he will know the story of Sheep Stealer and Nettles, and he will know that a way to make friends with the dragon is to be taking them food. And it would not surprise me if that's how he tries to ingratiate himself. That probably won't lead on to him being a dragon rider, but it's the kind of thing that I think he would do. Roman Lakovet saying, do you think George R. R. Martin always planned to have Fagon in the story, or was he a late addition? We saw a vision of a cloth dragon in A Clash of Kings, so maybe he did. I don't think he was in the original conception. As I said, I've made a video on George R. R. Martin's original plan. It should be out on Monday. That and Fagon isn't in that. And frankly, in 3 books, there probably wasn't room for him. Oh, pardon me. Maybe he thought of him. There was in that letter, there was one redacted paragraph. It just black lines through, so they weren't showing us something. So there was something vaguely spoilery there. But So maybe, but it certainly feels like the kind of thing that he added in a little bit later once he just thought to expand the plot a little bit. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever know until he says, but the plot, the argument in favor is the Varys plot, which you can read it as being, and this is iteration of George R. R. Martin's writing thinking rather than anything else. You can read what we hear about it when we get Varys and Illyrio talking. Arya overhears them. They're talking about an invasion. You have to wonder why on earth they were wanting Viserys and the Dothraki to be invading, and you have to wonder, were they really backing Viserys at that point in George's mind? I mean, possibly, probably they were thinking more about Daenerys from an early age, but retrospectively, he definitely made it so that this was all about Fagon. Do I think he was always planning to have him? No, but I think that he sort of wove him into the narrative in a very clever way that made more sense of what was happening earlier in the story. Let's go to a question from Seltz, giving some love to the moderators. Thank you very much. My question is about dragons. Do you think there's a correlation in the extinction or resurgence of dragons to the extinction or resurgence of the White Walkers? Like, did the White Walkers perish 10,000 years ago because Valyria and their dragons were beginning to emerge? And are they coming back now or waking up because the dragons recently went extinct 100 years before the start of A Song of Ice and Fire? Personally, I think not. But this is one of the big unanswered questions, is why now? The others, I'm sure we will find out in the books. This isn't going to be, they're not just going to be these kind of like baddies who just come and wanting to kill and then get destroyed without clearly setting out what their motivations are, which is what we had on the TV show. We will understand more of their motivations. Now, is there a link between them and dragons? I love the idea that perhaps there's a link with what happened at Summerhall. The timing there is interesting. But for me, no, this is more, there's a bigger meta thing with magic in this world. We get magic comes from above in fantasy worlds. This is just one of the tropes that we have, and we get the red comet, which is sort of heralding these things. And that, I think that they seem to be an intelligent race. They seem to be observing things, and so they will have observed the signs and portents just as much as people like Melisandre will have. Let's go to another question from one of my patrons, this time from Catherine Furseth, saying, "Hi Robert, what is the main symbolism of dragons as used in A Song of Ice and Fire, and how is it obviously contrasted to the symbolism of ice? Both seem to be destructive forces, but how are they different and how are they similar?" Well, they are. I mean, I've talked about the Robert Frost poem before. Both can destroy, but one of the interesting contrasts is ice preserves. So what we have is this contrast where you have ice preserves, which we will see very clearly, I think, in Jon Snow's body being preserved in ice and then being brought back through fire. That, I think, is something which is going to happen. But with the others, the ice preserves, and they preserve those that have been killed get preserved. When you get the whites, they are dead beings that have been preserved, whereas fire destroys. It gets rid of stuff, and that is the sort of the big contrast. Both are bad. We don't like either of them, but they're different in their sort of approaches. What I find is the fascinating thing is how George R. R. Martin uses this symbolism to mold it together within John. So you get a lot of these references to things like dragonglass, frozen fire. These kinds of things link in as being where ice and fire come together. Dragonglass is clearly a link between dragons in some way, volcanic activity, fire, heat, and also this damages the others. This damages the whites. So dragonglass is this symbol of where these two things come together, frozen fire. And Jon Snow himself often has a lot of this kind of dragonglass symbolism. Also, the ice dragon symbolism for Jon is that you get a fiery dragon, but it's an ice with ice, so an ice dragon. This is Jon's symbolism. So that's what he seems to be trying to do with this, is that there are two different kinds of destruction. They're different types, but both would work, and that's where he goes. And then it's the things where those two things come together. It's trying to show where the links in the story are going to be. Okay, I think I've got about 3 more questions from my patrons. So now's a good time to drop some more questions in the chat. Lauren Mintz saying, hello, my dragon question has to do with the presumably future battle between Dany's dragons against the others. Are they really going to be that much of a threat to them? During the Dance of the Dragons, Vermax stayed in the crypts of Winterfell because he couldn't stand the cold in the north, and it wasn't even winter at the time. Not to mention, George stated that Drogon was barely big enough to pick up Dany from the ground, and he's the largest dragon. When winter truly comes, they might be able to take out some whites, but I can't see them being the all-powerful, game-changing weapons that many people seem to think they will be. Your thoughts? Yeah, this is an interesting one. So, Drogon will be bigger. Drogon will be more powerful by then. There's absolutely no doubt the dragons will be impressive. They will definitely be able to destroy whites. I don't think there's much doubt there. Fire does seem to be... We saw it right in the first instance when we saw the whites in Castle Black attacking Gerald Mormont. Burn them. This is the answer. That's how you kill the whites, is through fire. Will they be able to kill the others with fire? Perhaps not. There is, and again, we shouldn't take things as being necessarily the case that were in the TV show, but there was definitely that scene, if you remember, when the Night King, you get Drogon breathed fire on the Night King, and then the fire went away, and he's still standing there. I do wonder whether that is a hint that fire is not going to destroy the dragons. That fire is not going to be able to destroy the others in the similar way that the others may not be able to destroy the dragons that easily. So what we're then left with is we have to find another way to get rid of them. It isn't just about dragons. We have to find another way to solve the problem that isn't just let's try and kill them all. I just noticed in the chat, Greek Weirwood saying fire purifies. Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that George R. R. Martin says, with that ice preserves, fire purifies. Will they be useful? Yes, absolutely useful. Will they be the ultimate answer? No, I don't think so. The ultimate answer will have to come from elsewhere. Chaos Ballerina. Did Alice Rivers glamour the body of Caraxes? If so, why? Is that what the messenger to Unwind Peak saw and got laughed at for? Good question. I will. Cast Bellarine, you do this quite a lot. So you ask really interesting questions that I think I need to think about this one. This is towards the end of Fire and Blood. So the it's sort of quite a tragic story. Alice Rivers is allegedly a witch who is in Harrenhal, and she is one of the plot threads that is going to carry on into Fire and Blood Part 2, partly because she claims that she's got a Targaryen bastard child, partly because she is doing magic which is killing people and impacting on King's Landing, partly that she's there in Harrenhal, this hugely important central location. I will come back on the exact detail of this one because I don't want to give a half answer. I try and do wherever possible. There's something that I could give a waffly answer to on the day, or a good answer next week. I will always put it to next week. Talking of which, I think I've caused some confusion when I've been setting up the next few live streams, because I think I missed out a week when I was doing them. Also, we've got Reflective Rambling. Thank you very much for reminding me about the clocks changing. This always catches me by surprise. So don't necessarily trust the exact times we've got on for the future ones. So you know what is happening over the next few weeks is I will be sticking to doing 5 p.m. Eastern time. That probably means that for a couple of weeks, because the UK changes later than America does, for a couple of weeks it's going to be starting at 9 o'clock my time. So if you're in my time zone, it'll be a little bit earlier, but if you're in Eastern time, I will keep it the same. I am although I didn't set one up for next week, there will be one next week. In 2 weeks time, however, I will take a week off just to stop and recharge, which I think is good for everyone to do every now and then. So that's the plan, but then we will get back into the normal swing of things. Okay, let's go to another question from one of my patrons. This is 444. Do you think there is a possibility that more dragons will hatch before the end of the series? If dragons are Westerosi equivalent of nuclear weapons, shouldn't there be some dragon equivalent of a nuclear arms race? We know that for 150 years, no dragons were born from Westerosi eggs, but we don't know how many eggs are left in Essos. Many readers suspect that the Faceless Men were paid with a dragon egg for Balon Greyjoy's assassination, and one of them seems to be disguised as Pate the Novice in Old Town, who is looking for a book about dragons. As we don't know much about the contents of this book, it could be anything from literal manual on how to kill a dragon, through the history of dragons, to detailed knowledge of the life of dragons. Looks like Euron will bring a lot of magic and sacrifice to Old Town too. So a lot there to unpack. Euron is going to bring a lot of magic and sacrifice to Old Town and that area, but I think that this is all aim to get him control of a dragon that he's trying to steal from Daenerys from afar via the Ironborn, who have been moving all the way across there, and the plan is going to backfire, but perhaps not backfire completely. Perhaps Euron will get and it's going to backfire largely because Mokoro is there, and there is no way that Mokoro is going to allow anyone to steal Dany's dragons if he can possibly manage it. But Euron seems to be cleverer than most of the other people there, so he may well get a dragon. In terms of the Faceless Men being paid with a dragon egg, being paid by a dragon egg by Euron, we don't know where Euron would have got this dragon egg from. Maybe it's one from, as he would claim, Valyria. Maybe it's one from that was lying around somewhere in Westeros. We simply have no idea. What might they be doing with this? I have speculated in a video I did absolutely ages ago, but might there be a nuclear arms race with dragons? I like this idea. It obviously didn't happen on the TV show, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen here. I do like the idea, but it won't impact on what happens in the story, because even if somebody hatches a dragon egg now in the story, everything else seems to be wrapping up within the next 2 to 3 years, and that will not be enough time for a dragon to come to full growth to actually play a huge role. So I think the short answer is it won't matter. Could it happen? Yes, it could happen. Will it happen? Personally, I suspect not. But if it does, I don't think it will impact on the story. If all of that makes sense. Right, let's go to, I think I had, yes, DM Collins question. Do we have proof that dragons can fly north of the wall? Some magics cannot pass north, right? Or has late stage capitalism wounded my brain? Well, I can't speak for whether late stage capitalism has wounded your brain, but yes, the wall is magical. It forms a magical barrier, and that seems to imply that dragons can't fly north. We talked about Silverwing a little bit earlier on. So we don't have proof that they can fly north. The issue is what happens at the ends. Can you fly around? Now, the implication or the working assumption that we've got is that the wall ends at water, or originally did, ends at water at both ends. And this is because the others cannot pass over running water in this kind of way that's, vampires can't do it, that kind of thing. So that is the implication of what we've got going on here, which is that you could go around the outside of the wall. The dragon could fly around the outside of the wall. Do we have any proof? No, because a dragon has never tried, that we know of, has never tried to fly around the wall. I do have a pet theory that Hardhome, the original Hardhome, was destroyed by dragons, which would imply that they could fly around the wall, not necessarily over it. But again, we don't have any proof of that. Chaos Ballerina picking up for Andrew K, saying the curious part, well, thank you, curious part with dragon bonding. We see, depending on a new rider or bond, how quickly loyalty and allegiances switch with the dragons. Yeah, so they do. You can have, certainly someone like Balerion had, we don't know how many riders Balerion had at the end, but certainly 3, 4, 5, maybe even more. And that did seem to switch. You seem to be able to move from one dragon rider to the next dragon rider relatively swiftly. There are hints that sometimes you get a strong bond. Perhaps it's the first proper dragon rider and you get links between them. We see that with Jaehaerys and Alicent and their dragons, some quite touching moments when you get to the Dance of the Dragons there, that they seem to have formed a bond through the bond that was between their two dragon riders. Now, the way that this seems to be is almost like this isn't then you're bonded for life. In the way that, again, contrasting it to Warging, we're told that you get wolves bond for life with just one person. The dragon thing seems to work differently. So you can form a bond, as I say. It's curious, but this seems to be another bit of it. It's not just that you become one person. Frown Pouch saying Jon kills Dany and her blood splashes on a nearby dragon egg. Well, one detail that I picked up when I was doing my reread or re-listen to book 1, A Game of Thrones, was how when Viserys is abusing Dany at one point, he does at many points, but at one point when he does, he gets a belt and he kind of whips her with it effectively, and then her blood falls. She mops up her blood and then wraps up a dragon egg with that blood, so the dragon does get the blood in there. So there is a hint, and obviously, as we know, we need fire and blood for dragons to hatch. So a nearby dragon, will Jon kill Dany when there's a dragon egg nearby? Possibly. This is with that kind of feel that we've got going on here that I had ages ago, that maybe we could have this hint that this isn't the end, there is more to it afterwards. I do, however, think that if there are dragon eggs lying around at the end of it, in the same way that I suspect the Maesters poisoned the dragon eggs the first time around after the Dance of the Dragons, I think that they would definitely make sure that any dragon eggs that were left were dealt with. Okay, let's go to question. This might be my last question. This is my last question from my patrons. This is Mara Lee saying, in Chinese history, China's first imperial dynasty was said to have dragon blood coursing through their veins, leading the Chinese people to refer to themselves as descendants of the dragon. Is this myth and Tolkien's dragon lore where George R. R. Martin may have gotten his inspiration from to come up with House Targaryen and their relationship with dragons as a whole? Quite possibly. I don't think I've come across a clear description from George R. R. Martin about where he got his sort of inspiration for the dragons, because dragons are a very clear part of fantasy tradition, Western fantasy tradition, as well as you point out, Chinese fantasy tradition as well. There is clear inspiration, I think, that comes, as is often the case with Tolkien. We get the Smaug we know about, obviously, but before Smaug there were even bigger and more impressive dragons. Back in the first age of Middle-earth, we get Ancalagon the Black is almost certainly a prototype for Balerion the Black Dread. So this is the idea that you get this massive dragon, scary, black, horrific, that I think is picked up from Tolkien. And Tolkien did not come up with dragons himself. He took inspiration from a variety of other sources. So I don't think there is a specific thing here. I think that the link across with Yi Ti is an interesting one. The idea that the dragony influence may have come from that part of the world originally certainly is perhaps an echo of China. Mara Lee, again, thank you very much. Super Chat saying, you may have already responded to this, but will we see any character try to walk into a dragon to try to control it? Well, I don't think it will be successful if anyone does try to do that. I think, will we see it? I mean, the only person who I think, Jon might do something equivalent to that, but maybe we might see Bran attempt it. I don't think so. This is hard, sort of working forward to where we might be at the end of the story that would make somebody be wanting to do that, because we're at least a book away from that happening, because this won't happen until, at the very earliest, Dany and her dragons get to Westeros, and it's going to take them a book to get across to Westeros. So not going to happen in the next book. It's possible it could happen in A Dream of Spring, but as we said at the top of this show, that now may be a very, very long time away. Okay, let's just have a last quick check through the chat. Reflective Rambling saying, any theory on why there doesn't seem to be complex bloodline charts of dragons like purebred creatures on our days, given how special in our days, given how special dragons are, or how much he loves family trees. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So it's always a little bit vague, the dragons whose eggs these dragons all come from, because you would have thought, I would agree with you completely, that if you've got something like Balerion the Black Dread, you would go, oh, we want Balerion's eggs. But it's always left because that will create a very fine dragon of that bloodline. But George R. R. Martin always seems to leave it slightly vague. They are just dragon eggs. They've got different colors, but it's never, this is the egg from such and such a dragon. So is it strange? Yes, it is a bit strange, but this is clearly a decision that George R. R. Martin has made to make dragon eggs slightly generic. And I think it means, not generic, but non-attached, and I think it means that we're then supposed to treat each dragon as an individual. I think this is what the creative decision was, rather than trying to have this. He's already had Valyrians are all like this, Starks are all like this. That was a big part of what it was, and this almost the reaction against that, I think, is that saying it's not that we've got these types of dragons are like that. Each dragon is different, has got a different temperament, and looks and feels different. Mara Lee, thank you again. Very generous, saying, just a show of thanks for all the extra goodies you provide for us patrons and for always taking the time to answer all of our questions. Well, you are very, very welcome. DM Collins, thank you, saying, why has no one ever tried to just go to Sartorius and get some wyvern eggs and see if a Targaryen child could bond with them? At least they can fly. Well, people don't want to go to Sartorius is the first answer. And they may have thought of this. What we have, and we don't know yet, because the bit of history where that could have happened would be what we're going to get in Fire and Blood Part 2. Fire and Blood Part 1 is ending up at the point where the dragons are about to die out. We've only got a handful of them left after the Dance of the Dragons. What will happen next is the dragons will die out. Then they'll have a whole load of dragon eggs, and they'll spend a whole load of time trying to hatch these dragon eggs before they finally give up. So that's the route. Some Targaryens do get obsessed by this. Aegon the Fifth egg got obsessed by this. He went as far as trying to get people and knowledge from a Shai. So yes, he would have considered Sartorius. Did they go there? I mean, it's not the kind of place you would go to quickly or easily. We just don't have any record of it. Also, what's your hunch? A different question from DM Collins, thank you, saying, what's your hunch on the dragon in the Astapor fighting pits in 56 AC? Wyvern or Balerion, or several children in a dragon outfit? I don't think it was several children in a dragon outfit. I don't think it was Balerion. So this is when they're trying to work out where Balerion is. And you get reports of a dragon in the Astapor fighting pits. No, Balerion could not be mistaken for a wyvern, a wyvern. This was, I think, that it was that there will be. So Astapor is quite far to the east. They will have got some winged creature and used that in the fighting pits, not Balerion, in my view. Okay, I think with that, I will start to bring this one to. Although, hang on, I think I got another one come through. Yeah, Cars Ballerina saying, is Cannibal responsible for Scargosi cannibalism? No, I don't think so. So Scargosi cannibalism may well be overstated, but cannibal is dragon stayed on Dragonstone, basically, as far as we can tell. So that is just it fighting, it's eating other dragons there. Andrew Case saying agreed on the Bond, but does seem to be mostly human driven or controlled. Look at Vagar's abrupt switch, for example. Once Damon's wife's dragon and then later viciously tries to kill him. Yes, there is a Bond. There's a very clear Bond there. Okay, so I will be back next week. I will be looking at the others. So we've looked at the fire side of this thing. Next time we're going to be looking at the ice side of this thing, which will be really interesting because we got not much information, but we can start to pick through to what is it that we can understand about them. What is it that we can understand about what they want, what they are like, and maybe just a start of a hint about how they might be defeated in the books, because it won't be the same as on the TV show. But with that, I am going to say, moderators, thank you so much, everyone, for the fantastic questions. If you're watching this back a little bit later, then appearing somewhere around here will be the link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here will be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care, and I will see you again soon.